Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Tower at UNN. I'm your host, as always, Desire. Welcome to the Tower at UNN. Today, we're going to be looking at the criminal case number 718 of 1999, as this was a case that was addressed and a testimony was given by the late Dr. Suleiman Kiggundu. Today, we're mainly going to focus on things such as the intention that has been put to frustrate the Ugandan local economy by the regime itself, so that the economy does not function for the benefit of the people, so that the economy is easy to loot and exploit for the benefit of course, the small ruling class and its empathizers, supporters, and funders. But before we get any further into today's topics or whatever we're going to do, of course, first we're going to play the national anthem. Then, after the national anthem, I'm now alone in the studio. As always, my co host, Mr. Remedios Chintu, is here. He's well informed, has has researched. This is an elder in regards to all this knowledge that has not been put in the public, as and has not been put in the public or given to the public for reasons of why, for reasons, and the reasons why the public doesn't know are very evident. So he knows, has knowledge of, and yes, I won't be in the studio alone. We'll be with someone who actually not only knows of and has done the research, but also an economist. So that will be us today. But again, I'd like to welcome you all to the Tower UNN. And without further ado, we'll start with our national anthem. And then we will hear from Mr. Chintu, and we will pick up the show from then.
Oh, Uganda, may God uphold thee. We lay our future in thy hand. United, free for liberty, together we'll always stand. Oh, Uganda, the land of freedom, our love, our labor we give, and we've neighbors all at our country's calling, peace and friendship.
Welcome back from the national anthem. And that was, of course, the anthem that was written by our ancestors to represent or to give a vision to future generations to come what Uganda was. But without further ado, I would like to, welcome Mr. Remedios Chintu to the show, to give his greetings, and to you, our viewers, and people who are viewing it now or are going to view it later.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Desire, for that introduction. And we welcome you to this show, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. As always, we are here to present to you facts, not to attack individuals, but to present to you facts which might help us understand the problems our country is in, so that we can be able to save ourselves, our country, from the grip of these foreign imposters who are now killing us, looting our country. Some of you may already have known that today there was a big fire burning down our national theater. You know that the Masiro in Kasubi were burnt, schools are burnt, these people are out to destroy our country, and we must be ready and stand up to defend our country from the destruction which is being imposed on us. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to discussing more, especially the economic destruction of our country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chintu. Before we actually get into the show, we want to, of course, as here, we not only do we do, but we think we work on an advocate for federacy in Uganda. And with that being said, we cannot start a show without a particular state anthem. But today we're going to be doing the anthem of Bwamuswaga from Kochi, which is a chieftain within a kingdom, the kingdom of Buganda, which is in Buganda state. So without further ado, I'll ask the producer to please go ahead and play the song of Bwamuswaga. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
Kochi gwe chifo chafe ngatukwagala kwempaji yafe kamuswaga ayimyaine ngakulembela Kochi feche twagala kocha yakane kamuswaga ayinde gwe mutwe tuli bitundu byo enkuyege ngawe zikanya nafe tukanye fe nawe tutyo Kochi akule bulijjo nafe tukanye fe nawe tutyo Kochi akule bulijjo Kochi mukuza wafe ngatukwensiga gwengabo yafe abakochi twenyweze natulengele bija ekifo kyaffe kino kitumbuke kamuswaga ayinde kuma ekifo kyaffe ayimukama bwafuga byonna era kumanya manyi kamuswaga anywere omulungamye nga bulijjo era kamuswaga ayinde gwe mutwe tuli bitundu byo enkuyege ngawe zikanya nafe tukanye fe nawe tutyo Kochi akule bulijjo nafe tukanye fe nawe tutyo Kochi akule bulijjo.
Welcome back from the anthem of Obwakamuswaga. Now I'm pronouncing it right, I think. Obwakamuswaga. I think my favorite thing about the anthem is Gwemutwe Turi Bitundu Byo. There's so much that we can learn about ourselves that has been cast away in the shadows of people that intend to put shackles on us in any way possible, be it through our own mental them making sure we're not educated, them making sure we're impoverished, the inaccessibility to resources in nations such as Uganda that have so much to produce and so much to offer, not only to its people but to the world. And without further ado, I'd like us to actually start today's program on that note. For today's program, I think the first thing that we're going to do is us to watch a video. There is a video, the producer will play it. And this is a video of Honorable Namboze. You know, you question why you should even refer to parliamentarians as honorables. But this is a video of her in parliament giving a submission for the continuation of a lot of banks closing. And there's still a reference, of course, to Dr. Suleiman Kiggundu's case. And it's at the pivotal point where this kind of system of bank closures in a very abstract way, and in a way that it has been manifested by the parliament itself, by the ruling party, happens. So if we can please watch that video and then we'll come back from that point.
The fact that there are so many people who would have loved to interact with the committee, but they were never given an opportunity. I beg that it pleases you, Madam Speaker, that you also receive the documents that came from Suleiman Kiggundu's lawyers. It will be very, very unfair, Madam Speaker, if this parliament denies these lawyers an opportunity to represent Chibundu, who is no longer with us, Madam Speaker.
We invited all shareholders and directors by letter. However, we didn't stop there. We put an advert in both the Monitor and the New Vision, calling upon all shareholders and directors to come and appear before the committee. And on the day we asked, they all came. All the shareholders came, and we had almost a whole day conversation with them. However, after that, that's when we received a letter from Dr. Chibundu, the late Dr. Chibundu's lawyer, Messrs. Lukwagan Company Advocates. I don't want an impression here that there is some evidence that we shut out. If the lawyers were vigilant, they would have come with the team of the shareholders, because we put an advert in the papers calling them. They didn't come. So what possible alternative option did the committee have? However, we looked at the what? The letter. We had it, because he had also written and raised those very issues.
Welcome back from that video. So, message into, I think the first question that I want us to get into, just some brief, for our viewers who are watching, just some brief background on who Dr. Suleiman Kiggundu was, the legacy that he left behind, and the impact that he left also behind, not only for the person that he was, but also for the vision of what a local-based Ugandan economy could be.
Thank you very much for that question. Well, many people are not familiar with maybe the story we are talking about. But I want to tell you something before we go into the deliberation of the case. Dr. Suleiman Kiggundu and the late Joseph Mubiru, what I would say are the best, and I'm putting the word best in capital letters, are the best banking experts, financial experts, administrators, pioneers in the finance world as far as Uganda is concerned. Nobody else yet has come closer to the record of these two giants who pioneered in the business of banking. As you know, the late Joseph Mubiru was the one who started the Central Bank of Uganda from scratch. He reorganized a little bank which used to be called Uganda Savings and Credit Bank into the Uganda Commercial Bank, and it flourished, as you all know. It has never been a sick bank. It flourished. But now we also know that the killers of Joseph Mubiru were these Batusis of Fronasa trying to smear a bad name on the regime of Idi Amin during those days. Now, the same killers who are in power, they killed our man, Dr. Suleiman Kiggundu. Now, why are these great bankers killed? In economics, development, or rather the obstacles to development, are always a lack of capital. If you have no capital, you cannot develop. Now, these Batusi, together with their Bazungu benefactors, would love to see us undeveloped or underdeveloped so that they can exploit us to the maximum. Now, how do you have capital? Now, I remember when I started teaching 100 years ago plus, I saved a few pennies until I had enough to go and buy myself a bicycle. You have to save. But if you want to look, that is when you are looking at it from a small man's point of view. But if you are looking at a country's economy, that economy has to save. And the only way to save is through institutionalizing savings. Not a little Kintu putting his money under the mattress. But when you institutionalize it, that means you have to set up financial institutions in which John, Paul, Peter, and Harry can put their money. And that money will sit in that bank and become a source of credit for those who want to invest or who want to consume products. In both cases, you are developing the economy. The best thing these guys realized, unlike some of these other fly-by-the-night people who claim to be economists and they don't know nothing, as I would say, these guys realized we have to build financial institutions which are owned, controlled by us so that we can serve our people. Because these colonial banks were not interested in serving our people. And I'm talking about banks like Barclays Bank, National and Greenlays Bank, Standard Bank of South Africa, which became Standbank now, Citibank, Bank of Baroda, Bank of India. They are not interested in serving this woman in Woblenzi or a man in Liantonde. They are not interested.
Yeah.
And they don't want to serve those people because they don't wish them to grow. Now, if you look at how these indigenous banks came around, starting with the commercial bank, which opened up branches in almost every little town there is in the country. Then came indigenous banks owned by Ugandans. We have a list of those. You had the Nile Bank, the Cooperative Bank, the Tefe Bank, the International Credit Bank, and the Centenary Bank now. Excuse me. This is the envy of these monsters who wish us not to develop. Unfortunately, they have teamed up with external forces who are helping them to destroy us. Now, Dr. Chibundu was a victim. They saw him as a pain in the butt because he is trying to help these natives have access to banking, which would give them access to credit, whereby you would walk in that bank and they are not looking at you as a black man, but they are or a black woman, but they are looking at you as a human being, and you table your need. And he did this, as you all know. Many people were able to develop their businesses, whether the business is in trading or farming or whatever. You could go there and borrow money. That's what banks do everywhere. Even here in America, banks are there to lend money to people who want to develop businesses or who want to develop themselves. And so these Batusi who are now controlling our country, they don't want to see natives, we indigenous Ugandans, they don't want to see us grow economically and improve our lot. That's why they had to kill him. And then they had to kill all these other indigenous banks, as you know. I understand we had reached a point of having 10 indigenous banks plus 4 foreign owned banks. But the indigenous banks were spreading throughout the country, helping the Wananchi to develop economically and otherwise. And they have destroyed all these banks, except Centenary Bank, which is still hanging on a very thin rope.
Thread. Yeah. So when we get into this topic, we start to see because the coming of Idi Amin into power brought a heavy belief in nationalizing everything to be done locally, the economy to be turned towards, the local people to run the economy. We start to see that built up and that. So right, Idi Amin gets out of power. Then we have Obote for a little while. Then Museveni comes into power, whereby a lot of things now have been nationalized and have been localized. And then after the Bush war, right after then this idea of, because it's a nation that's coming from 5 long years of what was termed as a bush war that no one would understand why people went to fight. And then after those 5 long years, now the economy, though still very heavily localized, now they start to bring up this idea of investors. So if you can delve a little bit into right around, so we've had a very local based economy for the most part since independence, especially with Idi Amin's term. And then right after he comes into power, then this idea of investors starts to come in before we actually then go to talk specifically about Dr. Suleiman Chigundu's case. So if we can discuss the idea of investors around that time when Museveni grabs power to never let go.
Thank you very much for that point, and especially bringing up some of our former leaders. Although some new generation of self-made politicians do not want to look at the historical background of events as if it doesn't matter. But let me tell you, that's what matters most. You have to understand where you have come from so that you can be able to understand where you are and be able to chart where you are going. If you do not do that, I would say probably you're probably in the camp of the fools who don't know anything and can't do anything. Let me go back
Yes.
from the historical point of view. The first Prime Minister of Uganda was Beni Chiwanuka. Beni Chiwanuka can be remembered for 2 things. He handed over power peacefully to Obote without a fight. 2, During those few months he was in charge, he established what Uganda should look like when we get independence. That was, he made sure we can have a permanent home in New York because we shall belong to the United Nations. And he bought that piece of land where we have now the Uganda House. He bought 2 buildings in Washington, D.C., where we are going to have the Uganda Embassy, where it still is, and a couple of other things. Now you move to Obote. Obote, if you ask people, what do we remember about Obote? Most people are going to tell you that we remember Obote for one thing. He attacked the Rubiri and destroyed the kingdom. Now, if you look at Idi Amin and ask people, what do you remember about Idi Amin? He chased away the Indians and Africanized the Uganda economy.
Yeah.
And most Ugandans, including those who hated him, cannot throw stones on those 2 points. Now, when it comes to this Mutusi we have, what shall we remember about Museveni? Museveni is going to be remembered for stealing everything that Uganda had, for killing everything Uganda had, including our people, and for telling lies, and also for introducing a pro-Tutsi concept of giving people poison. Because we never had poison under Idi Amin or Obote. Never. It is a Museveni creation, and as we know about the history of the Batusi, that is one thing they know how to do best. So Museveni is going to be remembered for poisoning our people, stealing everything in Uganda, destroying the infrastructure and the economy of Uganda. And I don't see anything good we can contribute to this man when he's dead tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
I can't see. Now, your point was why has Museveni done that? Well, we cannot say Museveni because he has not been doing it alone as an individual. It is the team of the ruling Batusi which is responsible for these crimes of destroying the economy. If we are looking at the economic aspect by itself. And the best way you can destroy an economy is destroy the banking system of that country, destroy the production capacity of that country. All the industries we had are destroyed by these guys, stolen, and they they have tried to call it privatization. No, that is not privatization. Because if Sembule Bank belongs to a man called Sembule, how much more privatization do you want?
Exactly.
Isn't it? He owns it. The cooperative bank is owned by the Uganda cooperative unions. Now, when you destroy it, how much privatization? Now, if you look at where all these institutions went, they are in the hands of the ruling Batusi, and also others were swallowed by their foreign collaborators who have never wished us to develop in the first place. For example, Barclays Bank. I told you the other day, on Thursday, Barclays Bank came to Uganda in 1927. And by 2007, they only had 24 branches in the country. And those 24 branches were in Kampala, Jinja, and other major cities like Masaka. Okay? They never came, and they had a policy in their documents not to finance small or medium-sized businesses. We are only interested in financing big businesses. Now, if you look at Uganda, how many Baganda or Acholi or Yitesoti or Basoga had big businesses?
No, not. It's a very local niche economy.
Zero. The big businesses talking about was
Foreigner.
DTWS, importer of Mercedes-Benz, and this is
Yeah,
Muzungu.
yeah, it's their
Which is
businesses.
Gale and Roberts, which was an importer of refrigerators and all these other. These were big businesses. And who are the other
Total.
ones? Kirembe Mines. Kirembe Mine
Mm,
was not owned by us. It
mm,
was owned by Bangereza.
yeah.
So we were totally outside the realm of these foreign controlled banks. That's why people
Mm,
like Suleiman Kiggundu came to these foreign countries, learned economics and finance, and they could translate this knowledge and they say,
mm,
how can I go back home and help my people get out
mm,
of this grip of perpetual poverty? Let me help them establish banks whereby they can come as respected human beings, obtain loans, and be able to develop economically. Because, and I emphasize this, in the field of in the field of economic development,
mm,
credit is to the economy as blood is to the human being.
mm,
If you don't have access to credit, you are economically dead, because there is no, if you, it's the same thing as having no blood. The doctor is going to recommend blood transfusion.
mm,
If they tell you that your blood is coming, I don't know, maybe you are supposed to have 20 20 gallons of blood in your body, and they find that you only have 7. They have to pump a lot of blood in you, otherwise you are going to collapse and die. So
yeah.
that's what credit is. And the credit
Mm,
is going to be received from financial institutions, which are banks.
mm,
That is the simple economics in finance or
yeah.
financial development.
No, thank you for bringing that up because even till this day, as we speak right now, our whole banking system in terms of Uganda is not localized. It's still managed and governed by the same people through the same economy. We pump more money into an economy outside Uganda than in Uganda itself. We're still supporting the same businesses. And even now, with the coffee deal case, you can already see what's happening with the economy. But without
Mhm.
further ado, on that note, can we then get into, of course, Greenland Bank? How does Greenland Bank come to be as an institution? And what were the events that you remember that popped up right down to its closing?
Yes, let me tell you something.
Yes,
I got to change glasses. Um,
no worries.
Sometime in October and in November of 1998,
Mm,
a guy from the World Bank called Gary Adams was sent to Uganda
mm,
to, to find a way of manipulating the system and destroy the indigenous banks. He convened a meeting.
Sorry, Mr. Chito, can you please give us, I think for the audience, for people to actually go and this is, so it was 1998, named Gary Adams.
1998, between the month of October and November, a
Mm,
man called Gary Adams. Gary is Garry, Adams as ADAMS. From the World
mm,
Bank, he went to
mm,
Uganda and
mm,
convened a meeting under the guise of Uganda Bankers Association.
mm, mm,
All the banks in Uganda have an association called Uganda Bankers Association. And by the
mm,
way, before I go into this document, commercial banks are under the supervision of the central bank. It is the one which gives them the license to operate. It is the one which supervises their operation. It is the one which audits to make sure that they are functioning efficiently and equitably.
Yeah.
No, not even the Minister of Finance or the office of the president. No, it is the central bank which supervises the commercial banks in the country. Now, the commercial banks in Uganda have an association called Uganda Bankers Association. This Muzungu from the World Bank convened a meeting under the auspices of that association, but he invited only managers of the foreign banks, not the indigenous banks, like Tefe, like Greenland, Nile, Centenary, you name it, or Cooperative Bank. He did not even invite the governor of the central bank. So the Bazungu sat there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So the Bazungu sat there and did not disclose the agenda of the meeting, but they decided that all the indigenous banks are insolvent, poorly managed, must be privatized, and also closed. The Bazungu decided that.
Yeah.
Now, you have to understand that these Batusi are in cahoot with these Bazungu because the Bazungu don't wish us to develop. And the Batusi also are jealous. They don't want us to develop, but they want to swallow everything and make themselves fat financially. So they played that game and they decided that all the banks, all the indigenous banks are declared insolvent, poorly managed, must be closed, and privatized. Now, when you look at this, how come it is only the indigenous banks that must be closed? Second, the central bank, which is in charge of supervising these banks, hasn't told you that they are insolvent. And you come from Washington, D.C., and they tell us, together with your hyenas from Barclays Bank, Grindlays Bank, Bank of Baroda, and National, whatever, the Standard Bank. And these are the hyenas inside Uganda that do not wish us to develop. They are the ones deciding that all the native banks must be closed and privatized when they are already in the hands of private Ugandans.
Private
Now, you
Ugandans.
can see,
Yeah.
the lack of logic in their thinking. Now, when they did that, then they sent another team in 1987. Again, the World Bank financed a team of what they called experts to go
Sorry,
and do a diagnostic study of
again
all
in
the
that
banks.
same.
Yeah, in 1987, the central bank, I mean the World Bank, financed a team of their foreign experts to go to Uganda and do a diagnostic study of all the banks, the native banks in Uganda. And then they concluded that there has to be a restructuring of banking system in Uganda so that we can deter the people, the local people, from expanding exponentially in the banking industry. Otherwise, we are going to witness Ugandans taking off and become like Malaysia and Singapore today. So the forces of trying to destroy the banking industry, because they know once you destroy the banking industry, you have destroyed the economy. And once you have destroyed the economy, unemployment rises, poverty rises, corruption rises, because people are going to be biting each other's tail for a piece of meat. That's what is going on in the country. They have achieved what they wanted. Now, that's why I say in Uganda we have a saying that oguliko omuseesa teguzikira. When there is someone out there supervising the fire, it will never burn out. Because once it is kind of coming down low, he'll put more firewood in there and the fire will continue burning. These Muzungus are sitting behind these Nyarwandas to make sure that we are totally destroyed and kept in poverty. That is, you have to understand. This business of borrowing or whatever, listening to the World Bank, is a danger to our national development. Take it from me. These people are not out to develop us. In the first place, you people have to understand, we call it the World Bank, but its name was called the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. When did it start? In Brentwood, right after World War II, to restructure and develop Europe, Western Europe, which had been destroyed by World War II. Or else, communism is going to creep in and take over. Capitalists ganged together to save themselves or save their behinds against the onslaught of expanding communism. After World War II, that was the threat. And none of you was there in Brentwood when we were discussing this, because we were all colonies. Understand that? Until we gained independence, starting with Ghana in 1957. And then those of us in the early 60s and on. Then we just jumped out of our little huts and thought, oh my God, now we are sovereign nation. We can also sit down with the big boys. And we came and they said, come on, baby, come on, baby. When we got in there, we got nothing but bones. And then they changed their structure after they have built the economy in Western Europe and America. Then they restructured their operations to the point that right now, 67% of the profits the World Bank gets every year is from Africa. We are talking 67% of the profits of the World Bank comes from Africa. But what do we have? More poverty, more unemployment. Now, let me tell you guys, you cannot develop a country with a very high unemployment. There was a time when Portugal experienced 16% unemployment. They cried murder and they manipulated Angola to be able to take the unemployed Portuguese into Angola and replace the Angolan people so that the Portuguese can have a job. When I talk about replacing Angolan people, it is like you who is sitting here handling these machines so that we can broadcast. No, you're going to be thrown out so that a Portuguese can do the job and be paid $10 an hour or whatever. So you are now thrown out. You go back to your village and eat muwogo or cassava, as Museveni said, while the Portuguese is eating bread with butter and the jam on it. All right? In this country, when unemployment reaches even 8%, they cry murder. Or this president has to be thrown out in the next election because we have very high unemployment. Our kids can't find jobs. Yet, what is the unemployment rate in Uganda today? If you really had a very good econometric expert and went there and a statistician and went there and studied, you are going to find that unemployment rate in Uganda today is at least 80%, if not more. How can you live with an unemployment of 80%? 80. Many other African countries are anywhere between 60% or 85% unemployment. That's where we are. And the Muzungu is happy that the bloody Africans suffer. And you people, among especially you, the educated Africans, with the so-called degrees, with honors in economics and everything, and you can't see this kind of crap. I just wish your parents didn't send you to school, because you are better off being primitive and uneducated than being educated and you are such a fool. It is incumbent upon us as educated Africans to stand up for our people. We have to get out of this self-centeredness politics of Nariachi. Where am I going? Who is going to make me minister? Who is going to do this? Let me support him for that purpose. That is nonsense. Okay? Now, when these Bazungu decided that this is what we are going to do to this country and destroy it, and then we have found these Trojan horses who do not care about anything because they don't belong to any piece of land in this territory. We are going to use them as roving wild beasts, which they have done. Which they have done. They have used these Batusi as roving wild beasts. Wherever the Muzungu wants them to go, they will go. You remember when that Muzungu, Roger Winters, who used to be a CIA, went into Uganda after having aided the RPF to destroy Rwanda. He settled in Kampala and started the trouble of Darfur province in Sudan. Who was the first person to send troops into the Darfur region on behalf of the Americans? It was Rwanda. And yet Rwanda didn't have the capacity even to send a battalion across the border. They had no money. They had no any other resources to sustain a battalion outside their country. But yet they took them over to Darfur. Who has sent a troop at the command of the Americans to Somalia, to Southern Sudan, to Congo, to Afghanistan, to Iraq, Uganda. Where does Uganda get the money and the structural capacity to do this? Because they have the backing of these international criminals from Washington and London. You see, after they have tamed them to that point, then they can use them to do anything. But once they give them the order, and they know that these Batus, when it comes to killing, it is just like opening a bottle of Nile beer or Bell beer. They just kill in whichever way, and they don't care. They found them to be efficient in that role, so they have used them to the maximum. That is why our people, like Dr. Chibundu, were murdered. That is why many other people are being murdered who could stand in the way of this rampant exploitation and the destruction of Uganda. And once you destroy the economy, ladies and gentlemen, once you destroy the economy, you have that country by the balls.
True.
And there is no shortcut to that. So it is incumbent upon us as Ugandans to stand up we should stop this nonsense of, let me be praised, let me sing and dance, and the people will clap for me and dance for me, and they call me all these weird titles which don't mean anything.
Mm.
And let us save our country. If you are not willing to work with fellow Ugandans to save the country from the grip of these Batusi, then go find a country that you can claim to be yours.
So on that note, for some people who are watching us today and don't know a lot about the case number 718, and when Dr. Suleiman Kiggundu gives his testimony, and at that point in time, what was happening closer to the shutting down of Greenland Bank, and not only in terms of what was happening to the bank shutting down, but what was happening individually to him as an individual who had been left on an island and was now realizing that he had been surrounded all this time only to be engulfed by the wolves that were just waiting for his downfall. If we could go a little bit into detail of what happens leading up to that point of the testimony, then, as we all know, then just further on leading to his death or his assassination by the state.
Do you want me to read that his testimony?
I do have a copy here, but yes, we can read through it, and I think the producer will be able to put up some of it for us on the screen. I think we have a copy of it as well that could go up here on the screen as well for people viewing us so that they can see it as well.
Well, unfortunately, some people may be watching us on small phone screens that they cannot easily read what is displayed there. But I think we can read it. I have a copy of his testimony here. We can read it through
Please.
some of it so that people can listen and understand what we are talking about.
Of course.
Case, okay. I'm going to start here where he says, the evidence I'm going to give you will show that all transactions in count number 5, 6, and 7, and 8 of this case were done with full knowledge and full knowledge of, without objection, by the Bank of Uganda. I believe that is why the Bank of Uganda, which is in charge of regulating banks, is not a complainant in this case, and perhaps why the prosecution could not bring the then governor of Bank of Uganda, the late Mr. Charles Chikonyogo, to testify against me. Now, you see, this is what I told you. The Bank of Uganda is responsible for regulating the banks. My evidence will further show that the government of Uganda, at the highest level, from His Excellency, the President of Uganda, to his Minister of Finance and the head of privatization unit, had full knowledge of and consented to the transactions with Westmont Land Asia and those relating to the purchase of Uganda Grain Mill Company. The evidence will also show that all the disbursements referred to in the above criminal case were in respect of very secure investments and constituted little risk of a loss to Greenland Bank. The projects in question were solid, potentially profitable, and generated significant employment and other benefits to the economy of Uganda. Now, when these Bazungu hear that, and they are Banyarwanda hooligans, they feel so terrible. How can you benefit the economy? Your Lordship, the sequence of events will show that the closure of Greenland Bank and my arrest were politically motivated. Bank of Uganda did not prefer these charges against me. It was the executive, as testified by Mr. Aisu, the CID director, who preferred the charges. Okay. Now, Mr. Chibundu goes into the background of these activities. Excuse me. For instance, there were persistent allegations that Greenland Bank was financing ADF rebels and that we were working with Sudan and the Sudanese interests against Uganda. That's an allegation because Suleiman being a Muslim, so they are now trying to link him on ADF, which is very stupid. These allegations were based on an article entitled Uganda Rebels Claim Wealthy Backers, in which the magazine stated that the alleged Greenland connection to ADF may help explain the stormy relationship between the bank and the President Yoweri Museveni's government. Now, you all know that this regime has used their brother-in-law Mwenda to put articles in the press which could paint a funny picture or kind of paint a dirty picture on someone they want to criminalize. And that does not surprise me. Okay?
Yeah.
The Uganda government has long been wary of Greenland because of its association with the Sudanese interests. The bank also rankled the government when it allegedly held back a consignment of medication worth several $1 million destined for fighters in John Garanga's Sudan People's Liberation Army. It is thought that only a court injunction may have stopped Museveni's administration from freezing Greenland's central bank account. The name of Museveni's brother, Major General Salim Saleh, was until recently linked with Greenland Bank and its sister company, Greenland Investment. But he and others have now distanced themselves possibly to preempt a concerted effort by the government to rein in the Greenland Empire and cut off links to ADF. And this appeared in Africa Analysis, March of 1999. As if to confirm the importance the government placed on such allegations, in its report, the Select Parliamentary Committee on Privatization wrote that, and I quote, the committee would like to express fears of possible political infiltration by Sudan through the corporation CONCOP International economic involvement with the Greenland Group. Other unfounded allegations were that the Greenland Group of companies borrowed sums in the order of Uganda shillings 50 billion from Uganda Commercial Bank without security. In its statement published on 9th December 2000 in the Monitor after arbitration in London, Mugerwa and the Masembe advocates and the Byamugisha and the Rwaheru advocates, the government lawyers in this matter, admitted that these allegations were found to be false. In this statement, the government lawyers confirmed that only 13.4 billion Uganda shillings was lent to Greenland Group of companies and that these loans were regular and proper. Now you can see this being concocted by these. There were assertions by government officers and the media that Greenland Bank was soon to be closed following the sudden closure of International Credit Bank, Trans-Africa Bank, and the Trust Bank, all in the month of September 1998. This scared customers and resulted in a capital flight, which weakened the bank. That happens once they smear that kind of manure on you, people will start running away. And but
To go
the
somewhere.
central bank, that's why we have a central bank. If there is a problem of liquidity, the central bank jumps in automatically to rescue this local bank. But the Ernest and Young report of September 1998, which has been filed as evidence in this case, never recommended closure, but that 7.3 billion Uganda shillings be injected into Greenland Bank to make up for the non-performing loans and advances. This is exactly what we have been talking about. The central bank jumps in to rescue a bank which is having a liquidity problem. And the auditors of Ernst and Young recommended that. The board of Bank of Uganda meeting in November 1998 approved a standby facility of 10 billion shillings for Greenland Bank to help it contain deposit withdrawals arising from the negative publicity the bank was experiencing as a result of the foregoing allegations. The contagion effect of closing International Credit Bank, Trans-Africa Bank, and the Trust Bank, and the specific instructions given to some of Greenland Bank's depositors by various parties, including donor agencies, to remove their accounts from the bank. Now you can see who is pushing these people, telling them, withdraw your money from that bank, let it collapse. See, that is the political motivation. But before this money was disbursed, the government forced an intervention in the bank. On December 5, 1998, Major General Salim Saleh made a false statement to the effect that he had bought Uganda Commercial Bank using a Greenland Bank. That bastard liar, which was not true. The government immediately forced him to resign as military advisor to the president. General Salim Saleh features prominently in Chibundu testimony. That same evening, armed police were deployed at the branches of Greenland Bank to affect my dismissal as managing director of the Bank of Uganda, and the Bank of Uganda take over the next day. On December 6, 1998, I received a letter from Bank of Uganda removing me as the managing director of Greenland Bank. It was also announced that the Bank of Uganda had taken over the management of Greenland Bank. Now you can see Salim Saleh is playing a very big role here. And we're going to see more of his dirty hand in there. The government authorities in Uganda also talked to their counterparts in Tanzania and requested that a similar action be taken against Greenland Bank Tanzania Limited, a related but separate bank incorporated according to the laws of Tanzania. The fact that Bank of Tanzania complied with this request, knowing that Greenland Bank Tanzania had no problem and was financially sound, was another surprise to us. With effect from December 7, 1998, several CID officers were sent to Greenland Bank to carry out investigations which lasted more than 1 month. No officers were sent to Greenland Investments, the company Major General Salim Saleh had purportedly used to purchase UCB, Uganda Commercial Bank. This flow of events clearly shows that the Uganda Commercial Bank incident provided the executive with a convenient excuse with which to intervene in Greenland Bank, Uganda, and Tanzania. The bank was closed on April 1st, 1999. According to the minutes filed in the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into the closure of banks, there is no evidence of the board of Bank of Uganda ever having recommended the earlier intervention in or ensuring closure of Greenland Bank. Now you can see the central bank, which is supposed to regulate and supervise the bank, hasn't done anything. But these bastards are sitting out there in Entebbe and Mbuya in Salim Saleh's house, deciding what to do. And what are they doing? They are carrying out orders which were given to them by the Muzungus. And which Muzungus? The World Bank, the manager of Greenland's Bank, the manager of Barclays Bank, the manager of Standard Bank. Now you can see the hyenas are everywhere. So you people better wake up and understand that we are surrounded by hyenas. Then Chibundu goes on, I was arrested and charged on the same day, presumably to give the impression that I was the cause of the bank's closure, although I had ceased being managing director 4 months ago. After closing the bank on April 6, 1999, Bank of Uganda appointed Deloitte and Touch as both auditors and the liquidators of Greenland Bank at the same time. This was irregular because audits are done before decisions to close businesses are made and before liquidators are appointed. You cannot kill a person and you know he's already dead. Then you bring the doctor to administer medicine or injections on him, hoping he will be alive. How stupid can you possibly be? You have already closed the banks. Now you're auditing to see whether they should be closed or not. The audit report to be produced by Deloitte and Tochi was therefore expected to justify the decision already taken to liquidate the bank. Their report to the commission, however, failed to confirm whether or not the bank was insolvent. Goodness me. I will now proceed specifically with counts number 5, 6, 7, and 8 of this case, which related to lending money to these companies in excess of statutory limits without the permission from the Bank of Uganda. There is no way a commercial bank can loan money to another company or an individual in excess of the recommended regulations, which are only issued by the central bank. Then he goes into the building which they had set up, built, but I will skip that part and get and show you how these Banyarwanda have surrounded us. It was a disbursement made through FIBA Uganda Limited to enable Greenland Investments to meet the purchase amount for the Uganda Grain Millers Limited acquired shares in Greenland Investment, which it would give up as purchase of shares in Uganda Grain Millers, increased or, if necessary, through an international loan. In 1996, Major General Salim Saleh, in the names of Caleb International, won a bid to purchase 51% of Uganda Grain Millers. When he could not raise the money, His Excellency, the President of Uganda, telephoned me in December 96 and asked me to help his brother regarding the payment for the Uganda Grain Miller shares. I told His Excellency that we could lend Major General Salim Saleh the money if the government guaranteed the loan. He asked me to get in touch with the Honorable Matthew Ruchikaire, the then Minister of State for Finance Privatization the next day for further discussion on this matter. Now you see how they have positioned themselves in everything. Wherever you turn, it is Nyarwandas. It's not a Ugandan, not an Acholi, not an Itesot, not a Munyoro, not a Muganda, but these pharaohs. After discussions, the next day with the ministry and Major Salim Saleh, we agreed that since it was difficult for the government to guarantee the loan, the government would allow Caleb International to assign 51% shares in Uganda grain millers to Greenland Investments. If Greenland Investments itself was able to raise the money without government guarantees. Major General Salim Saleh agreed that Caleb International would assign its shares to Greenland Investments, provided he was given a commission and reimbursed the costs he incurred in preparing and winning the bid. Now, there was a bid in which many other people bid to buy Uganda grain millers. And Salim Saleh supposedly won the bid, but he didn't even have the money to pay for it. When other people who had the money were denied the opportunity to buy this thing, now he's crying out to give him a loan so that he can pay for the bid which he has purportedly won. Mr. Ruchikaire had that morning sent Mr. Keith Muhakanizi, you remember that guy who looks like a giraffe, and Leonard Muganwa, the executive director of privatization unit, to my office to finalize the arrangements. Honorable Joshua Mayanja Nkanji, the then Minister of Finance, issued the 51% shares in Uganda grain millers directly in the names of Greenland Investments upon payment of the bid sum to the privatization unit. I informed the governor, the late Charles Kikonyogo, of this arrangement before the payment was made to the privatization unit for the 51% shares in Uganda grain millers. I also informed him that we were going to use funds mainly mobilized from outside of this for this transaction, and that these funds would be returned to sources as the public bought more shares in Greenland Investments, or if necessary, through an international loan. The governor made no objection to this arrangement and said this was acceptable provided Greenland Bank addressed and subsequent liquidation requirements. Greenland Investments' decision to purchase the 5% of Uganda grain was sound. In 1997, Uganda grain assets were valued at 17 billion Uganda shillings. So you can see these people were handling everything in a very professional and expert way. And they were cross-checking with each other among those who are fully responsible, not knowing that they are being infiltrated by these monsters. This meant that Greenland Investment had bought assets worth about 9 billion Uganda shillings for a price of 6.3 billion. A very good deal. You are paying 6.3 to acquire something worth 9 billion. Fantastic. I would invest in that kind of a deal if I had the money. And that the related disbursement of 4.3 billion Uganda shillings were well covered. As for Greenland Bank, which acted as the intermediary in this arrangement, it had created a big customer in Uganda grain miller that would enable it to access over 12 million US dollars per year in revolving credit under the GSM program to support wheat grain imports from the USA. Now, you guys, I want to stop right there and tell you about this American program. They have a program here in the United States under the Department of Commerce and the Export-Import Bank. If you are going to buy American products and sell them overseas, Export-Import Bank gives you a credit line whereby you don't even have to put your own money in there. These people were buying raw wheat from the United States to take it to Uganda, grind it into wheat flour, and make bread and make whatever you can make out of it. America is going to give you the Export-Import Bank here of the United States, right here in Washington, D.C., is going to give you a credit line that they will pay for that wheat. Say if you buy wheat worth $10 million, you don't have to send $10 million to America. They will guarantee it. The wheat comes to you, you sell it in Masaka or Uganda. Once they gave you $10 million worth of wheat. Once you sell it and you make 30 million, all America wants you is return our 10 million. You are left with what? 20, which you didn't even work for. I mean, you didn't spend money on it. Then the next time around, you can ask for, now I want wheat worth $50 million. They say, you're a good boy. Take it. Once you've sold it, you've made 100 million. All we want is our 50 million. That's the American trick. So this company, Uganda Grain, had made this arrangement with this American outfit, and they were getting wheat grown here in America, sell it to Uganda. For America, they are happy. And you are going to be happy because you are going to grind that wheat and make more money. And they don't care whether even if it was $50 million worth of wheat and you made $1 billion, they don't care about the other profit. All they want is their 50. So you make arrangement, and it was going to be arranged through Greenland Bank. And the Greenland Bank was going to get a percentage. That's why this man says, that's a damn good deal. We are going to be making money too, because we are going to be the intermediary of this transaction.
Transaction, yeah, I see.
You see? And the bottom line is honesty. Don't be a crook. If you are honest, you are going to make money. That's why this man says, thank God we had this deal. And he was very happy to see it. And the governor of the central bank was also very happy that, thank God you are doing a good job. That's fantastic. Go for it. Okay?
Yeah.
This meant that Greenland Investment had bought us, I think I've explained that. As for Greenland Bank, acted as the intermediary in this arrangement, it had created a big customer, and they were very happy. Through Greenland Investment, these shareholders owned 51% of Uganda Grain Millers, a company that produced wheat flour, animal feeds, bread, and maize flour, and employed over 450 people. Now, this is my view. This is the way to develop a country with local people participating in major industries. In such instances, institutions like banks would be serving as engines of growth and development. And that is Dr. Chigundu's statement. Now, you can see, ladies and gentlemen, how these people are operating. They are using their, wherever you go, they have positioned themselves in such a way that wherever you go in Uganda today, they are there. And they tried to entice this man so that they can turn around and take everything away from him. Okay. There are some other details. I don't know if our people would like to. This was Greenland. This was an exciting opportunity for Greenland investment to deliver once again on its objective of having Ugandans participate effectively in privatization of enterprises owned by the government. It was also an opportunity for Ugandans to salvage Uganda Commercial Bank from foreign hands. Our predecessors had founded Uganda Commercial Bank to assist indigenous Ugandans in business because they were not getting sympathetic facilitation from foreign-owned banks. Okay. After the telephone conversation with Major General Salim Saleh, I contacted our outside friends who agreed to help us. I canceled my trip to Dar es Salaam and immediately returned to Uganda. The next day, on February 27, 1998, we met with the Westmount representatives at Major Salim Saleh's residence in Imbuya. This meeting was attended by General Salim Saleh, Muhozi. Now, this is very important, guys. Kainerugaba, the president's son, Charles Imbire, and other officers from Greenland Investment and the Greenland Bank. Now, what I want to mention here is none of these people has an official role in running the economy of Uganda, in running financial institutions, but you are bringing this little fool, this drunkard Kainerugaba, and you are bringing Imbire and all the other Batusi, determining anything. If you cannot believe or see that this is a syndicate of Batusi mafia, then I would say, which Uganda are you looking at?
And may I say what's very interesting is the fact that these are decisions affecting the economy of a nation done in someone's house. They met at Salim Saleh's house in Buya.
Not in the Minister of Finance or Minister for
No,
Economic Development
no.
or the governor of the central bank. The central bank is in charge of the monetary policy of a country. Which
Nowhere to
role
be.
is Salim Saleh? The Minister of Finance and the Minister for Economic Development are at least officially in charge of the Minister of Finance is in charge of the fiscal policy, while the central bank is in charge of the monetary policy. The Minister for Economic Development is in charge of all development projects which can improve the economy. Improve, not kill. Improve the economy. Where does this hooligan Muhozi come in? The only thing he knows is to get drunk. You see how our country is in trouble?
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is portion of Dr. Chibundu. Of course, as you know, they manipulated it. They called him a thief. They called him everything. And finally, while he was in prison, they poisoned him and he died.
So, well, this is a bit obvious, but Salim, they managed to distance Salim Saleh from the case as a whole, and Dr. Suleiman Kiggundu ends up being put behind bars, where he's assassinated by the state itself. What happened in terms of the aftermath, like the economic carnage that happened? Do we then start to see the rupturing of localized businesses? Because what I loved about Dr. Suleiman's testimony is every time he would mention, he would say, we're trying to do this locally and we would get an international loan if needed, but we would love to do this locally, invest in the economy here and in the people here and get the money going. So when you have someone, an individual who's then been part of building institutions in an economy, uh, be uh, be at the end of a landslide of 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 orchestrated shutdown on these local economies. What then in those next years was to be seen was to be left of local businesses as a whole in terms of the Ugandan economy?
That's a good question. If I could look at the animal world,
Mm,
I want to look at a wild pig.
mm,
A wild pig usually can have about 6 or 10 little piglets.
mm,
And the hunter goes there and he kills the mother pig
mm,
and takes it home and eat it. What
mm.
do you think is going to happen to those little piglets, which were dependent upon their mother?
And if you will
Chances are they
survive.
are going to starve to death, or they are going to be victimized by small predators, like even a snake could kill one because their mother is not there to defend them. Or if I could look at a benevolent person in the village who is helping these children in a poor primary school somewhere, and you grab him and throw him in jail, and those kids have no person to pay their school fees or even to buy them porridge, what is going to happen to them? They will drop out of school, they will starve, and most likely they might die of hunger. This is what these pharaohs have done. You have taken away the man who had brought salvation, economic salvation, to so many people, and destroyed the institutions through which he was providing this service. What is going to happen to those people? You can look at Charles, Peter, Josephine, Immaculate, who had an account in that bank. What happened to the little money they had in there? Most likely they could not even retrieve it. But more importantly, you can look at a person who had started a very nice carpentry shop in Woblenzi or Yantonde or Yiganga or Kamuli, and he was always depending upon the credit line he had established with this bank. The bank is not there anymore. What does he do? He's going to be thrown out of business because he cannot sustain the operation. And in most cases, he had bought some stuff from some suppliers and he was selling his products. Now he's totally out of business, he's unemployed. You might probably find him in Dubai looking for a job cleaning the toilets of Arabs. This is what is happening to our economy. That is why you find mostly Baganda in the diaspora doing all kinds of odd jobs. And then you ask them a question. What is your level of education? Some of them had very good jobs. Some of them had very good prospering businesses. But they are now out here driving a taxi or working in a nursing home because that is the easiest thing they can get when they come out here. The economy has collapsed because they grabbed it where it hurts most. Destroy their source of capital, their source of credit. When Chibundu established those banks, he introduced ATM machines into Uganda, which were never there. When Barclays Bank bought that skeleton of a destroyed bank, the first thing he closed was ATM machines. 2, Barclays Bank closed the branches because now those former Greenland or Nile Bank branches they are now under his name, Barclays. They closed the branches which had been established in areas which are predominantly indigenous Ugandans areas. To the point that now Barclays Bank owns 40, I think it is 46 branch. They owned 46 branches after acquiring these native banks. But they have 24 of those branches in Kampala city alone. Now we are looking at a country called Uganda. And more than half of your branches are in Kampala city. How about the person in Kapchora? How about people in Liantonde? How about people in Kochi? How about people in Busia? They have no access to banking. When we had these native banks, they had these local native banks out there serving them. They could deposit their money in there and they could come out and they borrow because the banks have to loan that money. That's how they make money. Banks don't make money by keeping it in the vaults. Here in America, the commercial banks have a regulation. They have to keep 25% of their total deposits as reserve with the central bank. I don't know the rules of Uganda banking, but if I assume that they do the same thing, if they put 25% of their deposits in the central bank as a reserve for a rainy day, the other 75% has to be given out to customers as loans, not as a free lunch, no, as loans. And when they loan you that money, of course, they charge you an interest, which becomes an income for the bank. But they have given you a loan so that you can go and expand your business of selling fish or fishing on Lake Victoria or growing tomatoes so that you can sell them to the market or raising chickens. And sometimes you will borrow money to pay the school fees of your child. I met a family in Canada when I was there 100 years ago. And I spent Christmas with that family. They had 2 children. One of the children became a priest. And that priest worked in Kiggundu Seminary as a professor. Those of you who know Masaka. And that priest and his brother, they told me that if it was not their father belonging to a local credit union, they would not have gotten education. Because their father used to work in mines in Sydney, Nova Scotia, Cape Breton Island. And the miners were just like laborers at home. They don't make much money. They were poor people. But the man used to go there every semester to borrow money so that he can pay the school fees of his 2 sons. And one of the sons managed to finish school and chose to become a priest and studied and got a bachelor's degree. I think a bachelor's or master's. I never asked you how many degrees he had. And he ended up going to Uganda and a teacher at Major Seminary. Now, if there is any priest in the age bracket of 60 plus, you can remember there was Father Austin McAdam as a teacher there. That is the priest I'm talking about. How many Ugandans benefited from that priest's teaching? And those whom he taught have benefited many Ugandans. But hadn't it been the capacity of borrowing some money from the local financial institution, by then for them it was the credit unions, that priest we wouldn't have benefited from him. You see what banking does. The benefits can extend to people you never even knew existed. How many people were benefiting from borrowing from Greenland Bank, from Cooperative Bank, from Tefe Bank, that had vibrant businesses going on, and their children could go to school, their wives could dress nicely, and the beer sellers could sell beer too, because they now have the capacity to buy the beer. And some people's daughters could marry these rich kids. You see how banking is at the forefront of developing a country. And that's what these bastards are killing. They don't want you to develop.
That must have been.
Okay.
How about now? Oh yeah, the job is to constantly kill the idea of capital, of course, with their enablers. Because the sooner we have access to capital and, of course, better resources, the sooner we can take ourselves out of the situation we have been intentionally put in. And what I think for the next bit, I wanted us to look a little bit into the politicization of this, because I feel that the closing of Greenland Bank had, of course, there's the effect on the people and the rupture in the economy, but then it carries on in the political narrative and narrations in Uganda and in opposition politics to a certain extent. So I wanted the producer to please play us a video from, of course, the lawyer Elias Lukwago talking about receiving files and talking about this case. So if we can see this case from his point of view, as he was the lawyer he claims to be.
Elias Lukwago, the lawyer for the former managing director of Greenland Bank, Dr. Suleiman Kiggundu, has waited for close to 4 months in anticipation that he would be called to defend his client in a probe regarding to the closure of 7 banks, with his client's bank inclusive. While Kosase is said to have had an interface with the Greenland Bank legal team, Lukwago says he too should have been called to represent his client, who is now dead.
I was entrusted with a number of documents, very confidential documents, concerning Greenland Bank and Dr. Chibundu's life. Even the most secret document you can talk about, you may have in life as an individual. So, I'm going to speak authoritatively on these matters.
Addressing the press today, Lukwago wondered why he was never summoned, alleging that he has confidential information that pins those in the highest office on the land.
We are ready to present this evidence. I've written to them with the request that if it pleases them, they should schedule a meeting so that we place this before them and they summon these individuals who are mentioned in these reports. I need to repeat them: General Yoweri Museveni, General Salim Saleh, General Muhoozi, Charles Imbire, Honorable Matthew Rukyakaire, and others who are mentioned in these documents. Short of that, justice will not be done.
Lukwago is now urging the committee to delay filing of the report and probe further into the matters of Greenland Bank.
Let the outgoing chairman and his team hand over to the incoming one so that these investigations continue, because they seem now to be placed between a rock and a hard surface. They are racing against time. They were told by 22nd of this month they should hand in a report. Yet they are going to occasion injustice.
Victoria Bagaya, NBS, Live at 9.
Mr. Kintu, I wanted to bring these two videos today because it was very interesting looking at it from the perspective of our politics. And if I can lay out an argument of sorts or a question or something you can continue to, break down a little bit for us. So here we have Greenland Bank being shut down and the destruction of, the local economy. But then on another layer, as you have mentioned and stressed in this program for today, that of course there is the foreign hand that plays a huge, huge role. But then in the aftermath and the continuation of, derailing the economy and making sure that because the goal is to make sure that we remain underdeveloped, we then start to see the rise of the internal enablers. So at the start, you have, of course, Numbers speaking of the case. At the end here, we have, of course, Arias Lukwago also speaking of the case and not being called, to give his statement. And all this now, everything has moved from, because I want people to realize how the game is played. Everything that used to be discussed at Mbuya in Salim Saleh's house has moved away from that. And now Mbuya has become kind of the parliament of sorts to carry on and continuously not even debate, but lament on some sort of way on an issue that is actually dire, because the economy is continuously dying. But whilst it's dying, we have a parliament of sorts lament on why it died without actually bringing to the people or to the masses why it actually died. So we are finding ourselves in a problem whereby we have, of course, the external enabler and benefactors to this regime and this invasion, but also internally we continuously see the strengthening of the internal enablers to this regime, where they also will take on a comfortable role of playing along of sorts, of making a mockery of sorts of the events. Because as they speak of this case, it seems very far disconnected from the people and from banking to the Ugandan economy back to the Mwananchi. And it seems more like just a businessman or a few businessmen whose businesses got closed, unfortunately, due to, of course, a corrupt regime, if that makes sense. So my question, I think, in totality is, how then do we reassert ourselves? Because we're dealing with almost three enemies in one go. We have the comfortable enemy within, we have the foreigners we have to deal with, and then we also have the reactionary traditionist dynastic Tutsis who have also taken on this role internally within the nation. So how do we deal with all those three coming together as one and strategically plan and orchestrate this? Because if you're called into the parliament to speak on a case, we expect you to be there because it's your job to be there. But then you're saying you didn't get the invitation. But then the other person in the parliament is saying we sent out the invitation and also had the advertisement in Daily Monitor. So where are you getting lost in communication? We also saw this with the case. What happened with the court case? When the election was rigged. We've seen this numerous times when everything has to go through parliament or a court case somewhere someone's not communicating with someone abruptly because someone did not show up and things cannot go on to actually get to the issue. So how do we, looking now from the outside and looking at all these three enemies stationed, how do we reassert ourselves?
Well, you have a good point there. You have some parliamentarians who are doing the best they can, which is lamenting. And I think if we can get lamentation out of them, that's the best you can expect out of these guys. They are not going to deliver anything. They are inside Uganda, and they know how sharp the teeth of the hyenas are. We are now in a situation whereby all this is concocted by these hyenas. One of our friends called them snakes, maybe masalambwa, perfidas. All right, they are deadly perfidas. That I agree. Some of these people are trying to be careful to lament without provoking the perfidas from biting them. They
Yeah.
know the truth. They know the truth, but they are not going to expose everything they know, because if they did, they are dead tomorrow. And there is no question about it. They will be dead. Now, Lawyer Lukwago has made a very good point. If they knew he was his personal lawyer, if you really have a case, in the first place, let me put it back. If you have a case with a bank, it is not the executive branch, the president, his son, and his, mother, and any other hooligan they have in their mafia camp. Those are not the ones responsible. It is the central bank. And we have already seen in the testimony that when there was this false scare that brought some kind of financial earthquake to Greenland Bank, the central bank did what it is expected to do. They pumped money in there, which they are supposed to do. And that's what you expect them to do, so that this bank can overcome the financial earthquake which has come about as a result of this false reporting in the press. Okay? But this, and once that financial earthquake has been overcome, everything goes back to normal. There is no problem. But that's not what these people, they sat in Salim Saleh's house as real hyenas, and they plotted to destroy Greenland Bank and other indigenous banks, plus destroying this man who is the best brain we ever had after Joseph Mubiru in banking, so that Uganda is deprived of its, what you call it, its brain. Exactly this is what the British did to us when they came in our country in 1800. We had people, maybe some of you people don't know, the Baganda and the Bahaya were manufacturing stainless steel 800 years before Mzungu knew how to manufacture stainless steel. So what did the British do when they came into our territory? They went into the villages and looked for all those native people who knew how to manufacture stainless steel, killed them. Then they turn around and say Africans are primitive. This is what these guys are doing. They are picking our best brains, like Dr. Chibundu, kill them. Now we have a whole bunch of characters who claim to have degrees in economics and everything, who know nothing, and they are now being paraded. Is the economic advisor in the Ministry of Finance, is the economic advisor in the ministry, in the office of the president, including the president himself, who claimed at a meeting in Nairobi that he is an intellectual. He can't even tell the difference between a bourgeoisie
We shall
and
see.
will turn it. My God, he doesn't even know
It
what
doesn't.
those words mean. You see, this is what we have. Could you expect
Yeah.
that kind of stupidity out of Chibundu? No, you couldn't. You see,
Then I guess.
this is the problem of our country. Now, the internal enablers, yes.
Mm,
Now, when they were bringing charges against Chigundu,
mm,
why didn't they bring his personal lawyer to give testimony?
mm,
Why didn't they
mm.
bring the governor of the central bank to give
Central bank,
testimony?
where is that's
Why?
my question throughout this case. Where did the central bank go after this, and where is it even
This,
now as we speak?
honestly,
Mm,
honestly, where is the governor of the central bank in this case? Nowhere. But
mm.
because Chikonyogo knew what happened to Chikonyogo later on, they killed him
Killed him too.
because he
Mm,
could stand up and tell us, as we are talking now, what he knows as the governor of the
mm,
central bank. And his name is appearing in this testimony that all this transaction, we cleared it with the governor of the central bank. And he said, that's
mm,
okay. It is not breaking the laws. When we extended this loan beyond the certain limit, we cleared it with the central bank, and the central bank gave it an okay.
mm.
Because that is the job of the central bank
From the
when you
central
are talking
bank.
about commercial banks. Oh, yes,
Mm,
it is the job of the central bank, nobody else.
mm,
Not even the Minister of Finance. He can give some ideas, but let the central bank do its job, for God's sake. But you don't see the governor of the central bank in this case, throughout the whole case. You don't see his personal lawyer. Now, if this committee or these other so-called enablers, as you call them, if they want, why don't they bring the personal lawyer, Elias Lukwago, to come and give us testimony? Why did they invite other people or summon other people and they refuse to come? Because they were part of the criminal syndicate that could probably have been sitting in Salim Saleh's living room. And they are
yeah,
not going
here
to come.
it moved from Buya to Nakasongola, now it's in Gulu.
You see? So the bottom, you asked a question, what do we do that? Well, there is only one answer. Kill the
Mm,
bastards. Kill
mm,
them. Because if you don't, we are going to have these pafadas running around killing us.
mm. Then, Mr. Chintu, as we wind up the show, I'll ask the producer in a minute to put the studio line for anyone who wants to call in with questions or comments. I have then one last question.
Mhm.
What then happened to the Greenland Bank branch in Tanzania? And
They
what
closed,
also they just closed it?
yeah, they closed
How?
it. Case closed. Well, there is something, this is what we have to understand.
Mm,
This mafia group in Entebbe
mm,
exerted some influence on Tanzania. And we don't know
mm,
who are in the Central Bank of Tanzania because Tanzania
mm,
has been suffering infiltration of
mm,
Batusi. As you remember, I think it was President Chikwete when he discovered that the Batusi had infiltrated Tanzania to the point of they were, of course, they are very good at hiding. Some of them were hiding as Bahaya. And the Tanzanians just, the Tanzanians are trying to be very aloof when you talk about tribes. Whatever you
mm,
tell them, they are going to take it. They had Batusi infiltrating Tanzania. A general who was in charge of recruiting and training was
mm,
actually a Mutusi, not a real Tanzanian. The ambassador of Tanzania in Nigeria was a Mutusi. The educational attaché of Tanzania in the Tanzanian embassy in Washington was a Mutusi. I'm just giving you those three characters that I knew. And there were many. And the Kikwete found out and they kicked their butts out immediately. And then so many of them had to run away. And where did they go? They are in Uganda.
Uganda.
And the Museveni received them and they gave them money, guns, and machetes, and they distributed them around the country. They are the ones you are going to find in Sango Bay. You are going to find them in Kitigum. You are going to find them in Teso. You are going to find them in Iganga. You are going to find them in Bugerere and everywhere. So we have a problem. Anybody who does not understand that these are what our land professor called the Amasalambwa, the Pafadas. If you do not, if you haven't woken up and realized that these are the Pafadas, then I feel sorry for you.
Mr. Kintu, I just got another follow-up question on that. Then what really happened to the Greenland Bank assets in Tanzania, and what was the case in Tanzania? In Tanzania, was it just because they had from Uganda, then they shut down the bank immediately? There was no case, no trial, no procedures that were followed?
Not that I know of. There was no case, there was nothing, there was no trial, everything just boom.
And where did the assets go after liquidation?
I don't know if it was liquidated.
Okay.
Somebody owns it. You
Yeah,
never
somebody
know who owns it now. Someone, as they say, smiled all the way to the bank. Someone is smiling somewhere.
But
that's what you call highway robbery. This is robbery.
Yeah. It really is highway robbery. So now we're still left with the same inefficient banks that don't serve the people in the country, and all the other banks are closing. But as we wrap up, just one other thing to really stress on, Mr. Kintu, is this idea of investors. Because throughout that whole statement, knowing that Dr. No, not doctor, sorry. What's his name? Salim Saleh managed to make a whole bid and claim himself to be an investor. But then right after that did not even have the money to invest. It seems like in Uganda, privatization, or what privatization has become, it means them owning private property, not really anyone owning private property to a certain extent. Privatization only up to them.
That is true. When you say privatization, it means taking it from Kintu and give it to Hakizimana. That is when it is privatization.
We have a caller on the line. Let's hear from the caller.
My concern, I've been watching your programs right from almost day one when UNN started. I was intrigued. I'm not a fan of social media, but I was intrigued to watch your programs, and I've been watching them since then. Apparently, when Mr. Remigius Kintu came on, I found him a very interesting and very knowledgeable gentleman. But I have a problem with Mr. Kintu. Mr. Kintu, I may tell you, I am a Mutusi, but the way you describe Batusi, you generalize. I've looked at the characteristics they've given out or lined out for the Batusi in general, but I don't fall in that category, all characteristics whatsoever. Now, if you come up and really, there are people who don't agree with the system either in Rwanda or in Uganda. Not everybody that agrees with Kagame nor Museveni. Not at all. Therefore, every individual should be judged on his understanding and on his merit. And that is where I look at a human being. A human being, I judge you by your character and by what comes out of your mouth. Not in general. I used to live in Kampala and I would hear people say, Baganda are like this, Baganda are like this. I said, no. I had very good friends who are Baganda, very good friends who are Choris, and I would make my own judgment, not in general. But if you come on a public media and say, Batusi are the general enemies of society, when I'm a victim as well, it pains me stiff. I would think we would have a common goal and have an objective and look for that enemy in general and say, who is the enemy of this society? They have their ideas. We make even the twins who come from the same womb, the twins who share the same mother may disagree or agree. But I wouldn't take them in general. Therefore, I would suggest, Mr. Remigius Kintu, when you are talking, especially on air and public, try to distinguish and don't generalize, please. I beg. Otherwise, I'm on board. I support the cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful comment. I appreciate your view and I agree with you in many ways. One thing I want to ask you, is there anything that I have presented with respect to the behavior of the Batusi and what they have done in Rwanda and Uganda that is not true? If there is, please correct me. Another thing, I am not here to look at issues in a micro way. I'm looking at them from a macro way. In other words, I would want to hear or to find a group of good people like you, and I'm sure I believe you're a good person. I want to see a group of good people like you stand up publicly, as I have done, and tell your cousins to stop their evil and criminal acts. Then you are going to find a comrade out of me. When the black people here were fighting for civil rights, let me tell you, if you have ever been in this country, when the black people were fighting for civil rights and they were marching and being tear gassed, who were with them? The blacks, of course, were there. The Jews were there. But the whites, the real rednecks, they were never there. So, if you really, and you cannot be out there in the hiding and say, I am with you, but I'm not showing up at the march to Washington or at the march to Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama. Because when these people were facing police dogs and the tear gassing and the beating and arresting and even shot at, the Jews and the blacks were together. I would want to see this struggle being paraded as we are parading it publicly on air. And I want to see good Batusi like you also doing exactly what I'm doing, about telling their cousins to stop killing us, to stop stealing from us, to stop this, everywhere you go, they have positioned themselves in every position of power and influence. I want to see you telling them, why don't you make a Muteso, an Acholi, a Rugubara in this position? But everywhere I go, it is Hakizimana, Ruhungiza, Rukumbuza, whatever. If you can stand up and tell them, because you have better leverage than I do, tell them. But if you cannot, then you are not going to tell me I should not stand here and defend my people against your people. That I will not do. And thank you very much, and I hope you got my message.
Thank you to the caller who just called in. And Mr. Kintu, before that call came in, there was also another question on whether the case actually can be revamped. The case concerning, of course, Greenland Bank's closure, and whether that case there is a possibility of revamping it.
Well, first of all, Dr. Chibundu is dead. They killed him. We cannot bring him back. However, Greenland Bank, Cooperative Bank, all these indigenous banks which were closed, including our cooperative unions, which were destroyed, the Uganda Development Corporation, Uganda Hotels, those can be rebuilt, and we shall rebuild them. The banks will be rebuilt, maybe under new management, but the stockholders, I am sure some of them are still existing, or living rather. They can be, they can be resurrected. And these pharaohs like Salim Saleh, who have stolen all this money, we're going to make them vomit it. They will have to vomit that money, and we shall plow it back where it came from if we can. That is going to require very dedicated, patriotic, national lawyers, accountants, you name it. They will sit down and do a professional job and figure out how we can return all these stolen properties to their rightful owners.
So at this point, I'm going to ask the producer if there's any calls or any voice notes that have been left, but it seems like that caller was our only caller today. But Mr. Kintu, I want to thank you so much for today. Thank you for the presentation that you've been able to give us, the background, the history, and for adding to what we knew, but also for opening more pathways for us to do research and really think about where we stand, and if we seriously dedicate ourselves to our liberation and our sovereignty, how we can then I think there might be the same caller on the line, but I'm not sure until I get the Sego, the green line. I just want to thank you for today's show. So let's get this last caller. This will be the last caller that we're going to get. And then from that, we will wrap up today's show.
Hello, it's Simon again. I've heard Mr. Kintu's response, but I'm sorry, I beg still to disagree with Mr. Kintu. Mr. Kintu, my point was, I gave you an example that even the twins who are born together may not agree on one destination or one point. Therefore, when you say that you have to stand and defend your people, that's where I disagree. That is absolutely wrong. Have a program and say, this is my program, I want my program. But if I stood up and say, my people, no, you can't be 100% that all people will line behind you or will agree with you. Not at all. But have a program and say, okay, this is my program, this is my goal. I will defend those who agree with me on a specific point. And others may not agree with you on some point. But if you come up and character assassinate the entire generation, all the Batusis in general, that's where I don't agree. It cannot. Never can it be from generation to generation. It can never and never be. Therefore, just say, okay, there are a majority perhaps of Batusi, but there are still those who don't agree with those who are doing those things. And they are voiceless. I am voiceless. If I had a button to press and say I had an influence to tell someone to behave a certain way, I would tell him to look my way. But I am helpless. But I wouldn't want to generalize a tribe and character assassinate it and put it in a box that all the Kalabajongo, all the Atusis, their behavior, their character is it. Never. So I would like to correct that and look at individuals, judge a certain individual by character of an individual, not the entire race, please, not the entire race. That's my view. Thank you very much.
Again, I thank you, but I want to give you some homework. Go listen to the statement of Rwabogo with respect to how they want to treat us and what they think of themselves to be. Then you will have the answer to your question. As we are about to close, I want to tell my fellow Ugandans, this guy has asked me what is my agenda. I have made our agenda clear. We want Uganda, which belongs to Ugandans. We want Ugandans to run their country the way they want. We do not want foreigners to come and take over our land. We do not want foreigners to come and take over our country the way your people have done. We don't like that, and we are not going to accept it. Uganda is for Ugandans, and I'm not looking for Bwami in Rwanda. I am not going to go there and ask for a position as a Muruka chief or Gombrora chief. I don't need it. I'm a Ugandan. So you go back to your Rwanda, I remain in my Uganda, and one day we can meet somewhere and shake hands and drink some beer and have fun. But please don't dictate to me. You are not a Ugandan, and you should shut up and go back to Rwanda and take your business to Rwanda. You said you've been in Kampala. I don't know what brought you in Kampala, but anybody is free to come into Uganda. As long as you have the right papers, you can come and be in Uganda for whatever period of time. But this is not your country. This is our country. We are Ugandans, and you ain't it. Please let that get in your head. And as I am finishing up my presentation for today, I want to live to see the day when those who pretend to be good Batusi and the bad Batusi, whatever they are back in their country, and then I can sit somewhere in Uganda or in Kampala and hear people from every hill singing Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. And those who are not Muslims will be singing Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. And that will be the day when peace will reign Ugandans will be in charge of their country.
It seems like we have a few more people who wanted to come through on the topic. We're just going to allow for a few more, Mr. Kintu, but we
Okay.
are at a point of winding down. So if the producer could please go ahead with those few couple of callers. Mm, I don't think. Let me see.
I just wanted to say one last thing. Who is a foreigner? A foreigner is a friend you have not known. Everyone is free to live on this planet Earth whenever you want. You are in the United States of America. You were not born in America. If the Americans turned around and say, fuck off, get off, go back to where you came from, that's not the world we live in today. If I want to live in If I want to go and live in Kampala, that is the word we should want, freedom. I am free to live anywhere I want on the planet Earth. And I wouldn't call anybody I find a foreigner. A foreigner is a friend you have not known. That's the way I look at it. And we as a human being, we should be able to embrace everyone as a human being. Get out of this race business. This race business doesn't make money complete. No. As I said earlier, it is your character and what comes out of your mouth that makes you a man or a crab. And where you live is a choice. Except that man is a greedy animal. He puts up these boundaries and borders, say you can't come here. But naturally, man should be able to live wherever you feel, whenever you want on this planet Earth. I know you are a believer. God does not discriminate among his creation. Before God, we are all equal and no boundaries. So I look at you and I respect you as a human being who came into this planet Earth through the same process. Thank you.
I want to thank the caller again for calling. I think a lot of things get lost in translation when we talk about these things. When we talk about the matters of the nation and what's happening now, we need to understand that yes, borders are man-made and we put them upon ourselves. But when we say Ugandans, for Ugandans, we have to understand that there is a power dynamic that has been in play. Like when we come here, we look at a full picture. We look at the history, we look at where we are at now, and we look at the conditions that have created the conditions that we are in now, not only for us, but also for the same individuals, or if we say for to individualize them and act like there is no partnership amongst, for example, like Kagame's regime now and Museveni's regime now, and their works on the African continent and people like the US. So we need to start understanding that these are power structures and dynamics behind these things. And sometimes confronting them head front is going to be intimidating, not only for a few of us. Some of us are going to feel attacked, others are going to feel it's personalized to us, and others are going to, but either way, we talk about power structures, and I think we have another caller, so I'll let the producer go on and put that caller on.
Hello. Yes, Desire, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And Mr. Remedios Kintu, thank you very much. And for that counter answering the caller previous. There's one thing I wanted to note or maybe comment what they are doing today. These Vatusi people, click, what they are doing today in Uganda. When you have got a business and is thriving, is working quite well, they come and say you either sell to them or they buy in, and they will come with guidelines to the business that you sell to them 51% at a price that they will set. This has been done to so many people, myself inclusive. I had a factory, I had set up a factory in Uganda, and I had to close. I had to close it down. I couldn't even sell it after having wrangles with them. We had to close down to save money. They've done to many, many businesses, and people have run away to go to Congo to set up similar businesses, especially Kinshasa. But we are losing these kind of investments. We are losing Ugandans who can run real good business. The arrogancy they present to you when they are coming to try to encroach on your businesses is so impeccable. It's so impeccable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that might have been our last caller, Mr. Kintu.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, Uganda is suffering from a lot of brain drainage as a result of this tribalized ruling clique of foreigners that came to our country. And I repeat the word foreigners because if you are a Ugandan, you have to belong to one of the indigenous tribes of Uganda. You don't simply come out of works that they claim to be, and or not only that, but think that you are super duper. So you have to be the one in charge of everything, which is wrong and which is causing a lot of problems. We are talking about the problems facing our people. We are talking about problems which are facing our country, and it is our God-given right to defend ourselves against the onslaught of invaders who come in and think that they can dictate to us what we should be like. That ain't going to work. It will never work, and we are not going to accept it. All right? So, as I said, it is important for our friends, especially that gentleman, to go back and listen to Rwabogo's statement once again, because Rwabogo makes it very clear and makes the case clear that once you listen to Rwabogo's statement, then you know who is who and whom you're going to shake hands with and whom you are not, you should be scared of shaking hands with. So I'm not going to waste my time on that kind of foolishness, because that's real foolishness. And I'm trying to personalize. I don't know you, and I can believe you are a good person. And let me tell you, I have some good friends who are Batusi. One of my best friends was Jonathan Bihute from Burundi. I understand he's now in Canada. But if you call him, he's going to tell you he knows Kintu. We used to have good time together. And he's a wonderful man. I have nothing against him. And yet he was from a supporting the Tutsi family in Burundi. Okay, so that caller may be a good man, and he says he is powerless. Well, all of us are powerless, but we have our mouths. I'm using my mouth and my brains. Use yours to defend the innocent people. The record of the Tutsi is not of yesterday. It is stretched 400 years of evil actions they have been doing to human beings, wherever they are. What are you trying to defend? When all this was going on, you were silent and you were enjoying, while many people were dying and suffering. We have had bad leaders in Uganda. Yes. Idi Amin was bad, Obote was bad, but nobody has killed as many Ugandans as this Mutusi Museveni. Nobody has destroyed the Uganda economy as this Mutusi. Nobody has created unemployment for our people as this Mutusi. What are you trying to tell us? That you are good? Your talk is not your salvation. It is your people's actions that are criminating you. And
Mr. Chintu,
we are going to be in trouble in the country.
Mr. Chintu, I think we have another caller coming in right at this moment.
Sure.
Hello.
Hello?
Okay, hello, Mr. Kintu. I would like to thank you and Desire for the brilliant presentation and for all the research, all the time you put into research all this matter for us. I would like to thank you again for your response to that Tutsi caller. I mean, he's not happy to be called a Tutsi, but unfortunately, this is UNN and we have no apologies to make. Much as it hurts him to feel discriminated in my country, in Uganda, our country, how does he think we feel treated the way his brothers, his cousins, his sisters treat us in our own country? It's disrespectful, it's unfair. They are keeping all the money in their houses, which has led to a lot of poverty in the country, and he expects us to sit back and apologize because he feels discriminated to be called a Tutsi. If he cannot take it, we cannot take it. Our brothers and sisters are dying on a daily basis. I mean, we are talking about Dr. Suleiman Kiggundu, who died over nothing but corruption. And that's quite unfair. And for him to think he's going to sit down and dictate to us how we should feel, I think it's best he goes to them. He goes to Frank Gashumba and tells him what to say in public, not to come and dictate to us how we feel in our own country. That Tutsis have turned us into nomads. I'm sorry, but this is not the right time to even think we are going to apologize to him. Thank you very much for the presentation. And sorry, caller, if you don't like it, I mean, just sit in it. Uganda belongs to the Ugandans. And if you're going to be a Tutsi, I'm afraid you have to behave the way we behave. In Uganda, we say, "Ogende bulyambwa, olyambwa." Behave the way we behave. Stop killing us. It's not right. It's not acceptable. All the money is in your brothers' houses because you want to empty the country. How do you think that makes us feel? Go and speak to President Museveni. Go and speak to Muhoozi Kainerugaba. Thank you. Thank you very much. And have a good evening and a good week.
Thank you, caller. Have a good week as well.
Oyo omukyala asooka aveeyo atunnyonnyole ekyali e Rwanda akyogerako ki ng'ate bwali batuusi abatta abakuto bamalawo baleme kutujja ku mulamwa bulijjo ali luddawa nga twogera ku UNN nti omutuusi ye mulabe wa Uganda ng'ate bakimanyi bulungi nti abatuusi okuva waggulu gye baava mu Ethiopia emize gyabwe gyegyo tumaze okubayiga nti tizi their DNA omusaayi mmere yaabwe okutta abantu kalombolombo kaabwe kati saa zino lwakyavaayo agamba nti nno si karakitaazi zaabwe atuleme tujja ku mulamwa we are fighting batuusi out of Uganda kuba they made it in Rwanda kati ye sawa zino ali luddawa atubuulire ng'essaawa zino ne Frank Gashumbe yali yeewombeese kati naye essaawa zino amaze okumera ebiwawaatiro batumisleadinga agamba nti bo baba mu layini ya Yesu oyo Frank Gashumba kati tulwanyisa bantu tulwanyisa balabe baffe abatuusi abawaŋŋamye mu nsi yaffe. Mr. Kintu, continue. Malik yatugamba they are deadly. It is in their DNA. Deformation, lying, and fabricating words. Alimba.
Ono Galwango Bashir South Africa mbalamusezzaako mwannyinaze ali mu studio ne mukadde waffe Mzee Kintu webale tusomesa ate webale komawo n'otuddira mu pulogulaamu eno ku luzungu kuba ne lulina nalaba nga kyetaagisa abantu baffe abatamanyi Luganda okubaddira mu pulogulaamu eno ate kikoze bulungi era n'ogizza naye oyo omwami akubye omutuusa oyo essimu ng'akugamba nti toddamu ososole kati onoobaawula otya guruupu yaabwe ennene bonna tubamanyi amanya wabula abatuusi bonna abali mu Uganda babi era tujja basosola teri kubasaasira Mzee Kintu tulina obbakonkona emisumaali bategeere nga nabo bwe bassa abantu baffe teri mutuusi mulungi mu Uganda bonna bassa kimu be batutta be babba amataka gaffe Luwero yonna amataka gaffe batuusi be bagabba lwaki tetwogera ku Banyarwanda Bahutu naye era twogera ku batuusi kuba be babi tetujja baddiramu kubanyigira ku liiso batuusi muli babi bw'oba waliko Uganda Oluganda mmanyi okiwulira mwebale nnyo mwebale ddala.
I think that's us for today, Mr. Kintu. Again, I want to say thank you.
Kintu nansoni wanze tijja kwogera luzungu tirwidi ayo omusaada oyo n'endave yatukobere Munnayuganda ali e Rwanda aninirire Abanarwanda nga bo we batumazeeko emirembe nenda atukobereyo abantu basatu abali e Rwanda nga balina obuyinza nga bo bwe balinabo e Uganda oba tukobereyo Bannayuganda abali e Rwanda nga balinayo ettaka nga bano Abanarwanda bwe balina wano ettaka ewaife basanda imwe tulina obusungu muleme kwongera kutuniiza mutukoze ebibi bingi nno muleme kwebuzaabuza mujja kugolola ewaimwe Uganda y'Abannayuganda Rwanda ebe y'Abannarwanda nga Kenya bweri ey'Abannakenya.
I think that's us for today. So, Mr. Kintu, I want to say thank you so much for today's show. And thank you for the efforts, the work that you've done, the research that you've put in all these years into this aspect. As I said, sometimes when we do have conversations, by the middle of, just to what the eye meets, I couldn't believe that this is what was happening to Uganda. It's a little bit hard to grasp your mind around it, but when you look at the facts behind it, And where it lies, you cannot tell me in a nation whereby everything is literally being discussed in Salim Saleh's house and all the appointed people to be in charge of how these matters are going to be taken care of all belong to not only the same family, not only the same clique, but also have managed to keep it within the same tribe. We cannot deny the fact that we have on our hands a very reactionary, tribalistic, embedded dynastic ideology spreading around the nation. And as you said, Rawogo's voice note says it all. But I guess also I want people to remember that's why we say federacy based on off of the native indigenous Ugandan communities, because they exist. Let us not prioritize the feelings, let us not prioritize anyone's feeling over the sovereignty of the Basoga, the sovereignty of the Baganda, the sovereignty of the Acholi, the sovereignty of the Karamajongs, and all the other states in Uganda, because that has been undermined, abused, and taken away for centuries. We're not talking 50 years since the white man stepped there, and in continuation with these reactionary tribal groups. Let's look at the facts and then decide where you want to fight your war. But Mr. Kintu, thank you so much. And those I will invite you now to give your closing statement for today's show, and we'll be wrapping up.
Thank you very much. As everybody knows, sometimes the truth hurts. And sometimes and also the truth will always save you. As I said, I'm looking forward to the day when I will sit in Kampala or Masaka or anywhere and hear everyone saying, "Thank God Almighty, the Batusi are gone out of our country. We are now in full control of our country." And then we can sing the Alleluia and the Allah Akbar and enjoy and build a new Uganda. All these institutions they have tried to kill, we are going to build them. We have the money power and we have the brains. We have the brains. I remember about 10 years ago, no more than 10 years ago, I was in Namibia and I found that the man whom they treasured as gold for the Namibian government was a Ugandan civil engineer who was designing all the roads of that country, Namibia. His most famous road is the Trans-Kalahari Highway, which connects Namibia and Botswana through the Kalahari Desert. And he was a Ugandan, and a Muganda by tribe, by the way. But I wanted to reach his office. Oh boy, they were guarding him as if he was the prime minister because he was a jewel to the country. And yet, look at our country's roads. And this is just one example. Look at our country's roads. We don't even have engineers to design them. If there is money to do it, these hooligans who came from Rwanda are stealing the money. And then they steal it and they take it to Kigali. You know, when I hear someone trying to whitewash himself, pretending to be holy, well, heck, I've seen them. I've seen even bishops who are supposed to be men of God behaving exactly like these other hooligans, like the Salim Saleh, the Kagames, and the rest. So there is no good Mutusi that I know of. I want to see one. Because they are all in cahoot with each other. And we are going to get rid of all of them. All of them. They have to go back where they came from. Let us manage our country. We shall see peace from West Nile to Busia, from Karamoja to Kisoro, from Kasese to Malaba. And we're going to have peace in Uganda when these people are gone. But we are not going to see peace when they are still around. Thank you very much. Until next time.
Thank you, Mr. Kintu. And as I said before, actually before we leave, coming up next, we're gonna have 1 month's view coming up next, and of course it's gonna be on, Uganda Kontiko, and we're gonna be looking at, of course, the 9 years tenure of Katikiro Charles Maiga, and that's going to be, of course, with Omolangila Chimbukwe, who's going to be hosting, and the guest is going to be Jonathan Mwesigwa. So please tune in. It's coming in right next after this. But other than that, I want to thank everyone who's managed to be here with us today. Thank you for being here. And that is us for today. And I want to stress that the return of Uganda to the indigenous, not only nations, communities, and chiefdoms in Uganda is the return of sovereignty to the people who occupy those regions, those spaces, and who will build the future of what Uganda is to become. So good night, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're watching us. And until next time, that will be us, Tower at UNN.
Of the power should be from one region. The wealth should be from one region. The rest should be either puppets or employees. And at best, they would better be slaves. That is the new Uganda we need. We need a dynasty, a very serious dynasty. I know His Excellency doesn't like these things, these ideologies. Doesn't want these ideologies, but I'm not alone with such an ideology. We are going to seize education and health completely. We become part of it. Then we end up in agriculture, in the Premier's office. We control the refugees and all of those. Then we extend beyond all boundaries and make sure that we are the people in charge of each and every aspect. Then we go to the private enterprises. Baganda are very sharp people. They're very good businessmen. They can survive even with the smallest amount of money. That is their talent. We are not there. So let them do the donkey work. We do the prince's job. Let us be the kings. Our children will be the prince, the princess and the princesses, then let the rest be the subjects. I'm talking about business. The subjects will toil to do the work to sustain the kingdom. So whatever they do will be for us.